Welcome to Green and Red, scrappy politics for scrappy people. A regular podcast on radical environmental and anti-capitalist politics. Brought to you by Bob Bazanko and Scott Parkin.
The silky smooth sounds of the Green and Red podcast. This is Scott Parkin in Berkeley, California, co-host of the Green and Red podcast. Bob is off on assignment and won't be joining us today, but I am once again joined by Candice Bernd with Truthout. Candice, welcome back to the Green and Red podcast.
Hey, Scott, thanks for having me.
Yep, and we're going to talk about Atlanta. For folks, this will be the third episode, I believe, that we've done on Atlanta. There's some new news. Candice has been covering it, so we're going to just talk about that a little bit. And just general background, there's been a forest campaign going on in the Weelaunee Forest for about somewhere around 2 years in Southeast Atlanta. In, I believe it was January, there was a violent raid carried out by Georgia State Police and Atlanta Police, like a task force where a forest offender called Tortuguita was shot and killed by police. Lots of news, lots of things have been coming out of that. And so we're going to talk about that with Candice today. Candice, maybe you can just give us, just to kick off, give us any of the latest updates of things happening on the ground in Atlanta.
Yeah, well, I think one of the latest and most important developments is that there was recently, as of last week, a judge has denied a request for a temporary restraining order that would have halted construction at the Cop City site, right? So what happened there was an appeal by a member of a committee that is supposed to be like an oversight committee of the Cop City project. It's supposed to be like a stakeholder thing made up by members of the public. And one of its own members decided to appeal the land disturbance permit. Right. So under that appeal process, under the zoning ordinance, what that is supposed to do is halt construction or put in a stay until that the zoning board of appeals rules on the merits of the appeal itself. So there had been illegal construction and clearing work going on at the Cop City site after that appeal had been put in. And so the lawyer for Amy Taylor, the committee member, and a couple of other plaintiffs, now the South River Watershed Alliance, and also a county commissioner, Ted Terry, put in this request for an injunction, basically, that would stop work. And a judge has denied that, basically saying that the zoning ordinance doesn't apply. Because it's considered governmental property. So he sided with Atlanta Police Foundation there to basically deny that stay. So what that allows is phase one work to be done, which is just like they're putting up silt fencing to try to stop runoff accumulation, which was a major part of the dispute with the appeal in the first place. And then also like a bunch of security measures like parking lots. They're building up supplies and putting out patrols. They're dedicating a lot of resources to just like security patrols of the Cop City site. So that's what it is.
And that's in response to the forest defense campaign.
Right. That's in response to the forest defense campaign. So the judge also ordered that they have to start paying for inspections of the site and the work being done as well. Atlanta Police Foundation does. That's also part of the ruling. But basically what activists kind of said is that, this is bad. We don't like the fact that the judge denied the ruling, but we're going to keep organizing on the ground. We're building up towards this massive mobilization. March 4th through 11th is the week of action. So they are basically just laser focused on getting people mobilized to come during that week of action. To maybe potentially, reoccupy the forest. And
the legal fight is, there's a couple of different pieces of the legal fight, correct? Not just this injunction, but there's, this has been going on for this has been part of the strategy from the beginning. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that. If like who are some of the groups involved, what's been going on. I know that there's this project is happening. This forest is in the middle of a low income, mostly Black neighborhood, and how the community groups been responding. Are they part of the lawsuits, that sort of thing?
Yeah. So the three plaintiffs are Amy Taylor, this member of the advisory committee, the South River Watershed Alliance, which has been doing sort of EJ environmental justice work in South DeKalb County, which is where the Cop City site is. It's actually technically in an unincorporated DeKalb County, which is important because, for the primarily Black working class folks who live in that area, they're not even was having meetings about it and meeting who testified against Cop City. Technically those city council people aren't even representing the residents of the unincorporated area. I know a little bit about that because I live in an ETJ myself. So I don't have a city council person. I only have a commissioner. So, another person is the commissioner, Ted Terry. So he's also joined this lawsuit, and basically they're arguing that they're appealing the land disturbance permit because they're arguing that it violates the Clean Water Act. Basically, that APF has lied about the amount of green space that they are supposedly setting aside for Cop City. And in terms of the legal stuff, one of the amazing things that came out, I think last week or the week before, is this email exchange that got sort of leaked between the lawyer for the Atlanta Police Foundation, whose name is Simon Bloom, and John Schwartz, who is a lawyer for the appeal process for Taylor, Terry, and the South River Watershed Alliance. Basically, in this email, Dave Wilkinson, who is the CEO of Atlanta Police Foundation, straight up says, he's reacting to John Schwartz's argument that the zoning ordinance puts in a stay against construction, right? So he's reacting to that, and he says, we have no intention of staying construction. And he says, quote unquote, full speed ahead. So that's sort of what led to Schwartz filing the emergency restraining order, was because Wilkinson straight up said, we are not going to respect this and it's full speed ahead. And then, of course, the court has sided with APF. So that kind of just shows the ways the legal system fails and why we have to turn to direct action tactics and the importance of the mass mobilization that is coming up. So.
Yeah, and they just had a week of action last week as well that was more distributed around the country. Right. Lots of images of people targeting some of the corporate sponsors and corporate contractors in different parts of the country, companies like Atlas or financiers like Bank of America and Wells Fargo.
Yeah, we had a local action here in Bee Cave, which is just 30 minutes away from Austin. Atlas has its HQ in Bee Cave. So about a dozen people went and did a noise demo and dropped some banners targeting, Lonnie Jo Boyer, who's the CEO of Atlas. So Atlas is contracted in with Brosfield and Gorey to do the contracting work that would actually raise the Atlanta forest. So that was a local action that I attended and went to just here in the Austin area. But yeah, lots of distributed actions. But so the March 4th through 11th, they're doing, more of a call in to get people to actually come to Atlanta and camp. There's going to be, a concert. And several, days of action. I think the 9th is particularly a big day of action against police terror, where there's going to be lots of direct actions and marches and things going on in the city. So I'll be there. I'm looking forward to covering everything that happens. But yeah, it's a big moment right now for, struggling on the ground, especially as these legal maneuvers kind of are falling flat.
And and also speaking of kind of probably more of a legal struggle, there's the supposed investigation. You did also a recent article on this around the body cam footage in the investigation into the murder of Tortuguita. I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit, it's going back a couple of weeks, but I'm wondering if you could tell us what came out of that as well. Like, what was the revelation that we had from new body cam footage that we didn't know about before?
Yeah. So the body cam footage is also really important, just in terms of propelling also the simultaneous fight for an independent investigation of Tortuguita's police perpetrated shooting. Obviously, so what it was a unit of the Atlanta Police Department it shows the moment sort of like before and after the shooting of this other APD unit. Obviously the Georgia State troopers that are allegedly did this shooting famously do not have to wear body cameras. And so we don't yet have that direct footage, although it may exist. So basically what that body cameras show is APD officers more or less responding to the shots and saying, suggesting that it was friendly fire. So you have a couple of officers talking about, suggesting, did we shoot our own in there? Or like one of them says like, man, like you effed up your own guy. And then there are other suggestions saying that, the gunshot sounded like it was suppressed, which would be consistent with law enforcement weapons. The Smith & Wesson that GBI alleges Tortuguita purchased and used against the officer does not have a suppressor on it. So those are important details. Obviously, it's not a hard and fast smoking gun or anything, but it raises questions, and it throws into sharp relief this need for an independent investigation, because the fact that the officers themselves presumed that this was friendly fire, I think shows just the need for the fact that the police can't be investigating themselves, and how important that is. The family has really pushed for GBI to release the Georgia Bureau of Investigations to release what evidence they have and meet with the family face to face, which still hasn't happened. So they, want that evidence. Other activists like Kamau Franklin of Community Movement Builders are calling for a private investigation to be done. But yeah, basically everybody is united on the fact that we need an independent investigation. And we need, access to whatever evidence has been collected. One thing that people pointed out about the video also was that you can hear a drone, the buzzing of a drone. And so people are continually pointing out, like, where is the footage from the drone? We need to see that video. So yeah, I mean, it's a really important development as people prepare to go to Atlanta and camp, just the struggle against Cop City, but also, the struggle for Tortuguita's memory and their story, and keeping that story, unsort of adulterated by the police narrative, and the importance of not, just automatically believing what the police have alleged in this case. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's quite I noticed that early on the Georgia Bureau of Investigation PR team was like as soon as this happened, they were on top of putting out what seems to me to be misinformation, or definitely like a sort of cover up. Like the protester shot police, officer was wounded, the officers responded with lethal force, that sort of stuff. But it seems like as things sort of trickle out, that their story seems to be getting bigger and bigger holes in it. And it's a little bit, it reminds me a little bit of where the PR, the dominating of the narrative, that shock and awe of the narrative is actually a real key part of what these sort of militarized institutions do.
Yeah, and I think that we saw, the problem is when it first happened, because of the narrative that was put forward by the police, you saw some hesitancy on the part of major climate and environmental organizations to sort of put out immediate statements in solidarity with Stop Cop City and Tortuguita. And I think that especially after the release of the body camera footage, I think we have seen more organizations start to become vocal and put out, more statements, more members of Congress, AOC, Cori Bush, members of Congress starting to become vocal about this issue because the video does raise questions. So I think that is a positive development, although I don't think it should have taken the release of the body camera footage for it to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I have one other thing I wanted to talk about, which was, and you we kind of touched on this a little bit when we talked about like the week of action last week and the week of action next week. But a big part of this campaign has been pressure campaigns against the Atlanta Police Foundation, against the contractors, which are, seeking to cut down the forest, build Cop City, all of that sort of stuff. And there's been some recent successes with some of at least with the pressure on the police foundation board. I'm wondering if you could just like talk about that for a second.
Yeah, absolutely. In conjunction with that, we've seen this big burgeoning student movement really take off in Atlanta, especially across the historically Black universities and colleges, across the city. And so that there was a campaign at Emory, which my understanding is not an HBCU, but there was a letter campaign that pushed to get former Emory University President Claire Sturck to step down from her role on the board of APF, and it was successful. She did step down. She confirmed to me that she stepped down. So they have since switched focus to another Emory associated scholar who is still on the board. But you have, student movements at Spelman, at Georgia Tech, which is Mayor Dickens' alma mater, that are really pushing, stop Cop City solidarity. And it's really taken off. And I think it's really added this new sort of momentum on the ground in Atlanta that I think is helpful for the upcoming convergence, and especially will play a crucial role in the direct actions that are coming up. I think we'll see a lot of student involvement.
Hey, and one last question I have actually just thought about is that you also recently had an interview with Stephen Donziger, who's an attorney who was targeted in what he calls a private prosecution by Chevron, and he's been very outspoken on what's going on in Atlanta. And I'm just wondering if there were any insights that he had on what's happening on the ground in Georgia.
Yeah, I think Donziger's particular experience has been really sort of prescient with recent news that has come out literally in the last day or so about the potential for racketeering charges to get added on top of the domestic terrorism charges. So RICO was something that Chevron used against Donziger when he tried to hold the company accountable for polluting the Amazon. So they went after him with RICO charges, and then, it all led to this private prosecution in which Donziger spent a short amount of time in federal prison, but then, nearly 1,000 days on house arrest. And so Donziger was really prescient about this, and he drew like a direct, parallel between his own experience of criminalization and what's happening on the ground with the forest defenders in Atlanta. And I think that, one of the things he talked about was just the increasing corporate control and pointing to the sort of Atlanta Police Foundation as a slush fund, right? All of these corporations, including Norfolk Southern, responsible for the train derailment in East Palestine, pouring money into Cop City. Norfolk Southern donated $100,000, which is 4 times more than they initially offered to East Palestine. They initially their first offer to East Palestine was $25,000. So they donated 4 times more to Cop City than they initially offered East Palestine. And so that was a connection that Donziger drew out. And, I think with the possibility of these, which I should clarify, I think it's important to note just journalistically that it's still a rumor at this point, whether or not, these RICO charges are going to get added on top of the domestic terrorism charges that we're already seeing. But one thing Donziger talks about is that it sort of doesn't matter, right, whether or not the terrorism charges or the RICO charges ultimately stick, because it's part of this chilling campaign, right? It's designed to intimidate and chill speech and chill people, really, I think, especially in advance of this mobilization, right? If activists are thinking, that if they go to Atlanta and they take action, that they might get hit with racketeering and terrorism, I think they're convinced that could chill enough people. But I think that that's going to backfire. I actually think that, the more that they try to ramp up this intimidation campaign, I think the more people are going to come out.
Yeah, absolutely. Seems like a lot of people are involved right now. So hopefully that will be the case. I want to thank you for joining me today. Folks, you've been listening to Candice Bernd, senior editor and staff reporter with Truthout, talking about Atlanta. She has a number of pieces out, plus a great piece that's an interview of Stephen Donziger, who was recently visiting Austin. And so if you like what you're hearing, please donate to Green and Red Podcast and hit that support button, or go to our Patreon at patreon.com/Green Red Podcast, or check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And if you're watching this on YouTube, hit subscribe. And Candice, is there anywhere that people should keep an eye on to watch your stuff coming out?
Yeah,
I've already kind of said it, but you can say it too.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can subscribe to Truthout's daily newsletter at truthout.org, where you can get, the newsletter, and that'll have my bylines on it. And then you can also follow me on Twitter. It's just at Candice Bernd, CandiceBernd, where I share my reporting regularly.
Yep. All right. Thanks for joining us today. And folks out there listening, be sure to get involved and misbehave, because we need a lot of that these days. Talk to y'all soon.